Welcome back. This is session number 25.
Seems like not that long ago, we were on session 1. Right at the beginning of winter, and now we're at the beginning of summer. Halfway through the cycle.
Per the clothing that I'm wearing today, summer clothes.
Yes. We were in sweaters and jackets, and now we're in summer.
Last week, you got to see my bandage, and now the bandage is off, and you see the little incision points for the meniscus surgery I had.
I see you have the 3 dots that Mario uses.
That's right. Maybe he was helping. Who knows?
There you go.
Let's dive into our material.
Let's do it. All right. We decided to add a little segment at each of our sessions. So what is that?
Something practical. We're buffs for the practical. We want ourselves and you to be able to use this information, like right now, in your everyday life, something that's very tangible and very usable to help start to change things and make yourself feel better, make others around you feel better. So we're going to offer at least one real pro tip for spiritual growth every session.
Yes, we give you all the warnings all the time about if you decide to apply to become a chela. And we'll find out one more today. But the vast majority of people in the world are not ready for that. They have simply not enough life experience to be at that point where they honestly can choose that path. So it doesn't hurt to look forward, even though it may be many, many lifetimes ahead for many of our viewers. So there are, nevertheless, many, many little helpful hints, everyday hacks that we could apply to our own life to make it less stressful, create less karma for ourselves, and make the world better for all the people around us. That's something that every single one of you can do. You can de-stress your own life, thereby de-stressing the lives of your most beloved family members and your friends, everyone you encounter, even strangers that you encounter during the day. So let's make that a practice to do what we can. Wherever you happen to be, we call it lift where you are. Everybody can help at some level, and in some way, you can lift up the world. So,
True.
One of the things we've talked about is creating not only your own sacred space for meditation, but your daily practice could be something like including yoga, physical yoga. Could be just going to the gym or taking a walk out in nature, observing the trees and plants and birds and animals and the sky and the sunset, all of that.
That can be a very good practice. And if that is something that you resonate with, make it a spiritual practice. When you take your walk, make it a practice to perhaps not labeling or judging or opinionizing what you see. Just see without naming. Notice the trees and just notice them. Just don't label them. Say, oh, that one looks a little bit old and ugly and that one looks better. Don't try not that. Just experience and be. It's a very good spiritual practice. There's so many others as well.
And as far as not labeling, don't even say, oh, that's a pine tree. Don't test your judgment, your knowledge on things. Oh, that's a ponderosa pine, or that's a palm tree. Don't label any of them. Instead, tune into its energy. Feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to visualize the aura around it. Every living thing, including rocks, has an aura. So just try to tune into the energy of things rather than the physical visual image of it.
The perception of what's around us is usually only perceived. The perception is received through our physical senses. Usually, that's how we operate in the world. We got eyes, ears, nose, mouth, skin. But what Terry is saying is, yes, your eyes are open, you're walking, you're in the physical world, but participate at a different level. We say feel, but we're not talking about sensations on the skin. Learn to use that proverbial sixth sense. And there are more than six, by the way, but when you become sensitive to prana and energy, it's none of the five physical senses. And the way to do that is simple. Practice calming the mind through all the different meditation techniques we always give. Breathing. When the brain when the brain itself gets more calm, we naturally become opened to the other sensory inputs situations, if that makes sense. That wasn't very eloquent, but you know what I mean. Calm the brain, see without labeling, and you will perceive at a different level. You'll feel, you'll sense, like Terry was saying.
We talk about siddhis, unusual abilities that open up naturally as we progress. And guess what? Those are nothing more than a continuation of the senses that we have already developed. It's an increase of those very senses. It's becoming more sensitive. And the more we are aware of what's around us rather than projecting opinions on everything, because that shuts off any type of receptiveness. You've made your judgment, you announce it to the world, done, finished, put it in a package and put it on the shelf.
And that's all intellectual. That's all brain stuff. Let's not do that. Let's keep it open to flowing through and deeper.
Be willing to change your opinions on absolutely everything. I have to change mine constantly because I find something new that either disproves or shows that the opinion I had before was somewhat distorted. And that's what Raja Yoga is, getting rid of all these impediments. And they're very slight. The farther you travel on this path, the more minute and the finer those impediments become. But they never cease. You always will have impediments. So if you don't enjoy the journey, then you're going to suffer. You may as well be happy right now. Whatever you're dealing with, figure out, well, can I handle it or not? And the answer is yes, you can handle it because you will. You have no choice.
Tying this back to the first concept of a daily practice and the life hack, so to speak, this idea of perceiving without naming is just one of many, 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 many practices that we can and arguably should be doing daily. A daily practice is probably the most important thing we can do on our spiritual quest, is do something daily to get better. So another daily spiritual practice is, Terry alluded quickly to the idea of our sacred space. We talk about that a lot in our book. And in the sacred space, one of the many techniques you can do in your own sacred space is prayer or mantra repetition. In Sanskrit, that's mantra japa, the repetition of mantra. And there might be one we'll share with you today that we like a lot.
Let's do it. Or do you want to share that later?
We can do it later or now. Doesn't matter. Whatever you.
Let's do it now.
Okay.
Many of our viewers, I'm sure, were raised in a particular religion, or at least had exposure to a particular religion. And for many of you, it may be Christianity, it could be Buddhism, it could be Hinduism or Judaism, many different things. And prayer is one of those things that most religious people are aware of, whether you call it mantra or prayer. It's something that is repeated.
Or even affirmations. If you want to be secular about it, affirmations.
Right.
Are
and
similar.
it's a formula.
Yeah.
Something that you repeat that has some kind of effect on you. One that I always enjoyed was the prayer of St. Francis. And I think a lot of people respond to that for a very good reason. It's I think, an inspired mantra.
One of the many reasons why I became so magnetized to this guy when I first met him and took his classes. Oh, you had a
No,
neat
no.
needle in there. Was when he shared that prayer with us. I was still a young grasshopper in the world of spiritual growth, and I looked very carefully at the words, and I realized this doesn't sound like any other prayer, because I was raised in the Eastern Orthodox Church. We had the Nicene Creed, we had the Lord's Prayer, many prayers, which were very, what I would consider religious. This prayer of St. Francis seemed like a yogic mantra. Terry mentioned it might be an inspired, they should all be inspired, but this one in particular, and as he mentioned, people resonate with it. I was enamored with this prayer of St. Francis, and you'll see why.
And we both use it. I use it every single day in my meditation. That's part of my japa, part of my tapas. And so we did, and this is at Paul's suggestion, we changed the words a little bit, very slightly. So
Do you have one printed that we have slightly different versions of it.
we do. We each have our own version. We can each recite our own, and you can
Okay.
choose which one you want.
Okay.
You want to go first?
No, go for it.
Okay. The one I recite is, I am an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, I sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. When others seek to be consoled, I console. When others seek to be understood, I am understanding. When others seek to be loved, I love without conditions. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying to the material world that we are born to life eternal. So that's my version.
The words that I chose are a little bit different, but a similar, the same intention. I am an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, I sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Rather than seeking to be consoled, I console others. Rather than seeking to be understood, I understand. Rather than seeking to be loved, I give love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in releasing attachments that we are born again to eternal life. Om Shanti.
So, one thing, as you notice, we both have different versions, and it doesn't matter. But don't ever take something like that and think, oh, it has to be repeated exactly right or it doesn't work. That's not true. Pick whatever resonates with you and feels right for you, because that is right. That is what will work for you.
I will add to that. Now, we will honor traditions that we value, and we respect the certain lineages, but inherent in those lineages that we follow and uphold, we're given the authority to be the generals in our own army. As we've said so many countless times, we're not to follow blindly a leader, as is preached by many traditions. Rather, we're allowed and encouraged, and we're supposed to evolve it as we go. The student becomes the teacher, and then that teacher has to. So with that being said, let me also say that there are very many traditions that say, no, don't change anything. This is the mantra, and this is exactly the way it is. And I understand why they do say that, because in a sense, the Sanskrit language is a scientific vibratory practice. It's a practice of vibrations. And we talk about this in our book, that each letter, each word in the Sanskrit language is designed a specific way to create a certain vibration. So in that sense, certain words shouldn't be changed too much, but that's not what we're referring to here. If we're going to create positive affirmations for ourselves, a mantra for our own practice in English words, we do have free reign to take the authority and the autonomy to make it resonate with us better. So I don't want to conflict with certain strict Sanskrit words that are supposed to be said in a certain order in a certain way.
Okay, that's very well said. Now, let me give you the warning. And this is just something I came across reading last night. This is a letter from KH to a Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden in Germany.
Say that 7 times fast.
Yes, Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden. All right, as you can see, we're visiting from the future. We fired up the DeLorean and came back to make some corrections to what we recorded last week. So it's this week, but it's next week. You'll figure it out. Anyway, speaking of Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden, I had given the wrong information. I got him confused with another German theosophist, Franz Gerhardt, 2 different individuals. So Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden, he was born in 1846, so he was 6 years younger than Sinnett is. He studied law and political economy in 4 different universities in Germany. He then, with a business partner, founded a business in Gabon in West Africa. But he discovered while he was there that his real interest was in colonial administration. I don't think universities teach that anymore. Anyway, in 1884, a friend of his gave him a copy of Esoteric Buddhism translated into German, and he was immediately interested in it. He contacted Sinnett and HPB and became one of their very best supporters, especially after HPB moved back to Europe to work on the secret doctrine. And he actually received, I think, about 4 letters total, short ones, but 2 of them were received phenomenally from the Mahatmas. And he was on a tour, a speaking tour with Colonel Olcott in 1886, I believe it was. They were on a train, and both of these letters, one dropped out of the air, and then I believe a few minutes later, the second one dropped out of the air in this train car. And one of them was from KH, and one of them was from Moria. And they ended up being 2 certificates where they each said, when the secret doctrine is completed, it will be a work of all 3 of us, HPB, KH, and Moria. And each one attested to that fact. And at the same time, they said, don't reveal this to other people or don't publish this information. In 1892, a year after HPB died, Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden shared that information with W. Quan Judge. So that's how we happen to have copies of those 2 letters today. And in certain editions of The Secret Doctrine, they publish those 2 letters in the preface. So we know now that there were 3 people involved instead of numerous people, as in the case with Isis Unveiled. It was limited to the 2 Mahatmas and HPB. Those were the authors of The Secret Doctrine. And now, back to our regular programming. He also was helpful to her when she was writing the Secret Doctrine. So when he met her and decided he wanted to be a chela, he raised his hand and said, I want to be trained. I want to learn this. And so they accepted his offer. And this is the warning on behalf of Moria that KH sent to him via Alcott. This didn't come from HPB. This came via Alcott. And it said, for Dr. Hubbe-Schleiden via HSO. To be accepted as a chela on probation is an easy thing. To become an accepted chela is to court the miseries of probation. Life in the ordinary run is not entirely made up of heavy trials and mental misery. The life of a chela who offers himself voluntarily is one long sacrifice. He who would control hereafter the events of his life here and beyond has first of all to submit himself to be controlled, yet triumph over every temptation, every woe of flesh and mind. The chela on probation is like the wayfarer in the old fable of the Sphinx. Only the one question becomes a long series of everyday riddles propounded by the Sphinx of life, who sits by the wayside and who, unless her ever-changing and perplexing puzzles are successfully answered one after the other, impedes the progress of the traveler and finally destroys him. Let HSO explain what he knows of chelaship. We refuse no one. Spheres of usefulness can be found everywhere. The first object of the societies is philanthropy. We would call it today being unselfish, or what's the other word?
Brotherhood? Altruistic?
Altruism. We would more likely say altruism. The first object of the society is, let's say, altruism. The true theosophist is the altruist who, not for himself, but for the world he lives. And so then he ends this very stark warning at the end, a little bit funny. He's talking to the doctor. He says his health will be looked after. For the present, as little writing as possible. Der Vater M is in no mood of answering. I do so for him. So for whatever reason, Father M was in not a good mood. So Cage says, I'm answering for him. Once again, they throw in a bit of light information from the letters from the Masters of the Wisdom, second series. All right, now let's get back to work here. In session number 24, we covered part of a heavy letter, the second installment of Cosmological Notes. And as we pointed out in that session, it was in effect the outline of the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, the volume that deals with anthropology, the advent of humanity on this earth or on any earth, because the development is the same, basically, not exactly, but different versions of the same scenario, different productions of the same play, so to speak. We said also that these questions came from Sinnett himself. Hume is kind of off doing his own thing. So right now it's Sinnett and the master Moria still, although KH is going to come back into the scene before too long. And he answered 7 questions that Sinnett had asked, not so much in the form of questions, but in the form of statements, saying, this is how I understand this particular aspect of the cosmology. Am I getting that correctly? And then Moria would respond to that. So we talked about this, the 7 spheres, which KH had introduced many sessions back, and how they make this circuit from sphere A to B to C to D and then back up. Now, don't think that these are different planets of us in that way. Think of them instead as one development, but with different levels to it. So just like the Earth has its etheric, astral, lower mental, higher mental, etc., this is the same concept here. It's not a shift in location, as Moria points out. It's not a change in location. It's a change in consciousness or level of awareness. So he was taking the example of simply the mineral kingdom as it first comes out of pralaya at the very beginning of a new manvantara. And we pointed out that pralaya, being the resting phase where nothing even exists, it contracts down to potentiality of existing, not having lost anything that it gained before. All of the experience, all of the impulses, all of that is just simply in a resting phase. And then with the first breath, it comes to life again. We talked about the very first thing that happens is the beginning of separation, polarization, plus or minus, male, female, positive, negative.
Duality versus non-dual.
So as soon as that happens, there's a third aspect that comes in immediately, and that's the interaction. There's something going on. There's something different. Ooh.
Yes.
It's the same material, but now there's one aspect of it that's different. And they're looking at each other like, ooh.
Like imagine one eyeball floating in ether, and it looks around, there's nothing there. But then all of a sudden, boop, there are 2.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, hi.
Yeah.
And then there's the oh, wow, hi is the interaction, which is the third element. Now there's a Trinity, and the Trinity is not just Christian, it applies to manifestation.
And sometimes the oh, wow is, ooh, we should get together. And that leads to creation.
Or procreation.
Well, literally and figuratively. Mm-hmm. Anytime you have 2 somethings, there's going to be an interaction of some sort. And whatever the offspring of that is the creation.
Whether it's attraction, repulsion, indifference. Indifference is a connection. And that's how the universe comes into existence. In science, we call it the Big Bang. And there's immediately an expansion and tremendous friction and heat. And that's where, and then the mineral kingdom is the first type of matter. So minerals being planets, stars, anything that's anything that's rocky or dusty or fiery.
As we will learn later, the 2 greatest forces in nature are love and hatred. And indifference is just a different form of both of those.
Right.
So love and hatred is what make the world go round. And not just the world, the universe.
It's pretty, that's a whole, we can go down a deep rabbit hole on
All
that
right.
one.
So we've got manifestation due to polarization. We've got interaction. We've got energy. We've got stuff going on. And now we're ready to continue with the story here. So we covered the third question, which was basically what we have talked about already. So why don't you continue with question number 4?
Sinnett states or asks, the magnetic impulse, which cannot yet be conceived of as an individuality, enters the second sphere in the same mineral kingdom as that to which it belonged in sphere 1, and runs the round of mineral incarnations there, passing on to sphere 3.
All right. So as I mentioned, he is giving the example, Moria is, of just the mineral kingdom, because that's the first one that appears on a new planet. There aren't any plants, there aren't any animals, nothing else but minerals in the beginning. And on this first sphere that he mentions, remember, that's just barely below pure spirit. And as we mentioned in our last session, it's very nebulous. How you can imagine a mineral being nebulous and
Right.
changing form and morphing constantly, it boggles the mind. But
We don't really have physical matter that's like that in the physical world. The planet is there. It's just not, it wouldn't be able to be perceived with your physical eyes. We're still not talking about the physical realm yet. And yet there are minerals there. I know it's very challenging to conceive this.
So rather than worry about trying to make that a concrete picture, keep in mind just the vagueness of it all. It's extremely vague and shadowy and misty and might come into focus and out of focus. And that's all you need to know, is that it's just very bizarre sort of existence.
Sinnett continues with his statement. Our Earth is still a sphere of necessity for it. Hence, it passes into the upward series, and from the highest of these passes into the vegetable kingdom of sphere 1.
All right, so now he's talking about once it has made the whole trajectory through the mineral kingdom on the all of the different levels. So he's kind of skipping here. So it isn't as if the mineral on this first sphere becomes the vegetable on the second one. That's not how it happens. It has to go through all of the different, right down to manifesting on the earth as we know it now. Although the earth in its physical form has been shifting and changing already for billions of years, even in the physical.
This is easier to conceive because when scientists speak of the creation of our planet, or at the beginning millennia of the planet, as Terry said, there were no plants or animals yet. So that's an accepted condition, a widely mainstream accepted condition of the physical sphere of Earth. And that's what we're referring to, that the mineral kingdom has to go through the nebulous state that Terry was mentioning, that's flittering into and out of existence and down, condensing, coalescing into the physical. After the minerals have made that whole round of all 7 spheres, there's 7, right? Mm-hmm. Then Sinnett is saying Earth passes into the vegetable kingdom, or rather maybe the vegetable kingdom emerges on Earth. It might be a different way to say it, of sphere 1, which is again the nebulous one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it came down to the physical, although at that time it wasn't nearly as dense as it is today, and then made its way back up. And it left behind, obviously, the physical manifestation that it enabled or inhabited. So, in a sense, though the rocks we have today are dead, because the rock, the mineral bodies were left with the earth because they were part of the earth, but the spirit of it continues on. And once it reaches the highest level of spirit once again and has attained all of the experience it needed to gain to graduate from mineral consciousness, whatever that may be, then it's ready to experience the very same thing, except in the plant kingdom.
We use the words vegetable kingdom and plant kingdom interchangeably. When we say vegetable, we mean plants, trees, grass.
Yeah, and he uses the word vegetable. So that's the old terminology, that was vegetable.
Yeah.
And today we would be more apt to say plant kingdom.
Without taking us out of our process here, the reason that we see on the planet today that all the kingdoms exist here simultaneously is because they do happen. Well, we'll talk about the sequence of it, but it's not one and then the next, and we'll talk about that, how it's like spirals and interlaid, and that's why we have them all. We have rocks, plants, animals, and humans and superhumans all here now.
Yeah.
So it's not like, So,
and once again, don't get too bogged down on this. For one thing, keep in mind, they never reveal everything about it. And that's on purpose.
They want us to contemplate it and exercise our higher awareness. And that is what we mean by growing our consciousness or expansion of awareness or growing in spiritual stature. The process of figuring this stuff out, they're helping us do that. If it gave it all to us, we'd be lazier. We would not have to exercise our own consciousness as much.
Not to mention that the full comprehension of it requires your higher self. Only it can fully comprehend it. We're doing the best we can, muddling along here, trying to make sense of it. But no one is going to fully understand it unless they have made full connection with their higher self. And they will not be able to convey that information to the rest of us who haven't achieved that yet. So
only in meditation through the mental plane.
I'm sure that we're making lots of mistakes in the material that we're explaining because we're explaining the way we see it today.
We're bumbling along. We are trying, though.
And hopefully a few years from now, we will understand it a little bit better. So just be aware that this is a point in time as far as our comprehension of it.
If you'd like to do a little bit of additional reading on this topic, it's not stated as eloquently as we're reading here, but John Algeo wrote this introductory study course. And this was the course that Terry was teaching when I first met him in the mid 2000s, and which just really brought me into the fold of theosophy and spiritual growth. Chapter 10 is called The Plan and Purpose of Life, and it's about maybe eight pages long, and it has a different explanation. It's stated in different ways of this process of manifestation. And for those of you who have taken my yoga philosophy course in a yoga teacher training, you'll know this chart very well. I also have some shirts made with this chart on it. Supplemental reading if you'd like.
And I believe this book is not being produced currently in the form of a book, but it is widely available online in PDF form.
Links.
We'll put the link to that.
It's been in our first and second session, or the link is already there. We can put it in this one too. Okay, Sinnett continues. So we're halfway through Sinnett's question number 4. He continues, without any new impulse of creative force from above, its path around the cycle of worlds as a mineral principle has developed some new attractions or polarizations, which cause it to assume the lowest vegetable form. So we can also call that a kingdom jump. When we haven't really used the word consciousness in this context yet. Consciousness is experiencing life in the mineral realm. And then he says, once consciousness's path around the cycle of worlds as a mineral principle has developed, It is then caused to assume the lowest vegetable form. So I'm changing the words a little bit to make it more understanding for me. So once consciousness experiences all seven spheres as rocks and minerals, something causes that consciousness to kingdom jump, rather, you can say,
Well,
to the minerals,
it's
to the vegetables.
a graduation.
A graduation from one realm to another. And we believe we know the reason for that, and maybe he'll say it here. And if he doesn't say it specifically, we'll say why, from our perspective, why that kingdom jump happens.
Well, and this is a good place to point out that consciousness develops, it grows, and the forms have to keep pace with that. It's the growth in consciousness that fuels the change of the forms. So that goes on simultaneously. Consciousness is growing, it outgrows a certain level of manifestation, and then nature has to jump in and create the next level of form for it to occupy, so it can continue to grow in experience.
Stated in slightly different words, another way, let's imagine that you're a rock. You don't have any arms, you don't have any legs, you can't speak.
No eyes.
No eyes. You don't have any private parts. You can't go to the bathroom. You can't reproduce in the ways that we do. And yet you're still aware of something because you have some awareness of what's around you. But your perception would be very, very, very rudimentary. Pressure, heat, maybe, vibration. That's it. That's all you're able to understand if you had the body of a rock. Hi, I'm a rock. I can't do much. Well,
And also, it's a good idea to point out that it is only in the physical form that sex as we know it even exists.
Right.
We put so much emphasis on sex, and yet in the universe that has very, very little importance. Yes, there is polarity on all of the other levels, but there is not sexual expression as we know it. There is no marriage or giving in marriage in heaven, as the Bible says. Once you leave this physical earth, kiss your private parts goodbye.
and then the kingdom jump would be necessary for the reason that Terry just said. As we, or as consciousness, or as the universal mind grows in consciousness, it would be simply pointless and inappropriate for that consciousness to remain in the body of a rock, because the universe has so many other opportunities for expression, expansion, finding food, growing roots into the ground, interviewing for a job. Rocks can't do any of that. And that's why the kingdom jump occurs, but it's a very slow process. So after living, we'll say, living for seven spheres, trillions, zillions, quadrillions of years in that type of consciousness, there's got to be something more. And so Sinnett is saying consciousness assumes the lowest plant form, which might be moss or lichens.
Yeah, a one cell something.
Which is very basic type of existence still, but it can do more than a rock can do, and it gives consciousness more of an opportunity to do stuff. Literally, that's what it is, to do stuff, to interact, to experience that polarity, resistance, attraction, repulsion.
And that's where it first learns how to reproduce.
In the plant world, plants reproduce, do they not? In the physical world. So let's continue with what he says here. In vegetable forms, it, meaning I'm going to say consciousness, I guess, it passes successively through the cycle of worlds. So consciousness is living in vegetable forms. Now, forms is billions of forms. How many plants are there? How many kinds of plants are there? Billions, right? Consciousness lives in vegetable forms. It passes successively through the cycle of worlds, all seven. The whole being still a circle of necessity, since no responsibility can yet have accrued to an unconscious individuality, and therefore it cannot, at any stage of its progress, do anything to select one or other of divergent paths. period? Or is there something in the life, even of a vegetable, which, though not considered responsibility, may lead it up or down at this critical stage of its progress? Okay.
All right. So
There's
here
one more.
he's asking, I believe, can it regress? Can it go backwards? Because it obviously didn't make a wrong choice.
Right, but
But
he is saying that though.
yeah, he's saying, does
Responsibility.
it automatically continue forward, or is there always a chance that it will regress and go back to a moss after it's already been a rose
Tree,
bush?
a rose bush, a flower. He, through, though not considered responsibility, we can take that to mean will, choice, making an action that could be viewed as right or wrong.
Right.
Because plants don't have the ability to do right or wrong. So he's saying even if they can't choose right or wrong, is there still something that could impede or progress its process in the evolutionary cycle? That's what he's asking.
Right.
That, huh?
Exactly.
That's a question. And then the last sentence is, having completed the whole cycle as a vegetable, the growing individuality or consciousness expands on the next circuit into an animal form, which is the next kingdom jump.
All right. So we're going to find out, and Sinnett has stated it pretty succinctly here.
He's got that.
He's asking the same questions that you and I would ask.
Of course.
All right. So Moria says, the evolution of the worlds cannot be considered separately from the evolution of everything created or having existence on these worlds. Your conception of cosmogony, whether from the theological or scientific standpoints, do not enable you to solve a single anthropological or even ethnical problem. And here he's talking about the understanding of the scientists of the day. They don't have enough understanding of the real cosmology to understand how this works or why it works.
Do we know when Darwin came along with his theories of evolution?
Before this,
So Darwin has proposed survival of the fittest already, and that still holds true, but only in the physical realm.
Right.
Only. Darwin doesn't consider any of the awareness that's going on as well.
so science can't answer any of those problems, and they stand in your way whenever you attempt to solve the problem of the races on this planet, the human races. When a man begins to talk about creation and the origin of man, he is constantly butting up against the facts as science knows it. Keep on saying our planet and man were created, and you will be fighting against hard facts forever, unable to grasp the whole. But once you admit that our planet and we ourselves are no more creations than the iceberg now before me, and he's talking about KH. He's sitting in the same house that KH is, and he refers to him as the iceberg now before me. But once you admit our planet and we ourselves are no more creations than the iceberg now before me, but that both planet and men are states for a given period of time, that their present appearance is transitory, and only a condition commensurate with that stage of evolution at which they have arrived in the descending cycle, and all will become obvious. You will easily understand what is meant by the one and only element or principle in the universe, which is androgynous, the seven-headed serpent Ananta of Vishnu, the Nag around Buddha, the great dragon eternity biting with its active head, its passive tail, from the emanations of which spring worlds, beings, and things. You will comprehend the reason why the first philosopher proclaimed all Maya, except that one principle which rests only during the Mahapralaya, the night of Brahma.
Deep.
Yes, very deep. And yet, we can at least grasp vaguely some of this.
We can. There's one thing that stands out to me that we can make a little bit of, that we can glean a little bit of insight from. He says that the planet and man, I don't know why he uses the word man, but
Well,
because men,
man means human, but
right, but at that stage there weren't any yet. They're just states. And yes, states.
yeah, he jumps back and forth. Sometimes he's talking about only minerals, and now they've kind of progressed through plant and
Yeah.
animal, and then he makes the jump to man.
The thing that stands out is kind of cool. States, the condition of being a rock, a plant, an animal, or a man are states, are transitory. And that's like saying reincarnation. How does reincarnation happen? Well, our consciousness, our soul is experiencing the physical state currently. We're a spiritual being in the physical world for a time being. It's a current state of consciousness. When we go to sleep, we're in a different state. So it stands to reason that they're using the words individuality, or we're saying consciousness is experiencing these different kingdoms. But then he says, for a period of time, that their present appearance is transitory, just like these physical bodies are transitory when they die. And only a condition commensurate with that stage of evolution. So our consciousness is evolving. So Darwin talks about fish evolving into legged creatures, then legged creatures evolving into winged creatures. But Darwin doesn't talk about the commensurate consciousness,
Yeah.
which is evolving as well. And that's where this is so freaking brilliant. And then the point that I wanted to make, I'm still getting there, commensurate with the stage at which they have arrived in the descending cycle. That's important.
Well, currently,
Right.
humans are in the descending cycle.
All of physicality, and he's using the word descending because in a three-dimensional world where we have up, down, one dimension, left, right, second dimension, forward and back, a third dimension, that's all we can acknowledge in the physical world until you learn to meditate and go into the other realms. But so that's why we're limited to language here. And when he says descending, it implies down, but it's not down. We're coming into density,
Right.
physical density from nebulousness into the physical world. That's what he means by descending. And we're also descending consciousness too into more like separation, more conflict, more fighting and war. I think that's a profound statement. We're not on the upward cycle yet. We're descending in all aspects still.
We're at the very bottom of the cycle. Very bottom, and the most, probably, hopefully, the most material that we will ever get. I see a change in consciousness, and part of it has to do with technology. The fact is that with the interconnectedness that we now have, which didn't exist until 25 more or less years ago, people are creating networks. They are finding people completely around the world with similar ideas, connecting with them, forming these nodes of experience, of sharing common thoughts and ideas. And it's opening up a whole new world. Humans are the most isolated. And that's why they sometimes talk about poor orphan humanity. We have more separateness than any other group of individuals on the planet. We consider everyone separate from ourselves. Birds, fish, they operate as a unit. They flow. They communicate with each other in ways that science has not figured out. They don't collide with each other when there are thousands of them flying or swimming together. You don't see them colliding. And a shark comes along and
Yeah, I love that concept.
I love that. Yeah, but humans, it's like herding kittens. We really are. We are so completely separate from each other. But it's starting to reverse, and we will get there.
I'm sure that some of you are wondering, well, how much longer are we going to be at the very bottom for? And we've said this a bunch of times already. There's small cycles and big cycles. We may be ready to come out of
Some of us.
Exactly. Some of us are starting to, in the next 20, 30, 50 years, coming out of a cycle. But then remember, there are Yuga cycles and Mahayuga cycles and Manvantaric cycles that all have apexes and naders as well. And so we may be coming into an age of enlightenment in one of them, but in the grand scheme of the seven spheres, we're talking probably billions or trillions of years. It's hard to even conceive, but the 24,000 year precession of the equinoxes is only one. And once we get to the Satya Yuga of that, we might still be in the bottom cycle of the Manvantara, where the whole sphere thing is at the bottom. So it's kind of crazy to think about all. I don't want to get us bogged down, but yeah, it's hard to conceptualize.
So compare what I said previously about how separate humans are today with the state of the Mahatmas and their chelas and their superiors. They are very much interconnected to the point that their brains are interconnected like computers. And if one of them is lacking information in one area, he simply tunes into the person on the network who is the expert in that, and boom, has complete access to that knowledge, information, experience. He doesn't have to have all of that experience himself.
That's considered a siddhi, and that is accessible to all of us in the very near future. We can, maybe I shouldn't jump to that conclusion, but we can raise our consciousness to the mental and higher mental realms now. And the more adept we become in those dimensions, the more we can do this process. So we don't have to wait until the Satya Yuga of all these cycles to get to that level of power, of ability. We can access that realm now, or close to now.
So now you can get a little bit of an idea why the Mahatmas continually say, come out of your world into ours. Before, it didn't make that much sense. It's like, yeah, I really want to give up all of this that I've got, all of the material stuff and all of the stuff going on, the excitement, the drama in my life, for what? And if you don't understand it, then obviously there is no choice. It's like, well, of course I'm going to stick with what I know. But once you grasp that, it's like, ooh, maybe I would be willing to let go of that. All right, so Maurya continues. Now think. And now he goes way back to the pralaya. He's talking about the moment after a pralaya ends. Now think, he says, the Nag awakens.
And Nag refers to the serpent, like
Yes.
Ouroboros?
Right. Nag as in the serpent. And by the way, serpent and dragons as mythical creatures, symbolism, represent wisdom. Notice in the Bible, who was it that awakened Adam and Eve to the knowledge of good and evil?
Interesting.
It was Satan in the form of a serpent. It wasn't God. God said, you guys can just stay here in this perfect state and not have a mind, not have any options. You just stay there and just chill, hang out. They're like, and do what? There was no sex. So what did they do for entertainment? They didn't have TV or videos or anything. So they could have stayed in that perfect state, except the serpent came along and said, ooh, hey, you know what? The one thing that God said you couldn't do? Well, that's what you really want to do. And so, of course, Eve, being the more gullible one, supposedly, gave in and said, I'll try it. And then Adam, he was like, well, I don't want to be stuck here alone. So he tried it. No, but The serpent is a symbol of wisdom. So just keep that in mind.
One of our favorite guys, Patanjali, he's usually pictured with a serpent, and several of his sutras reference that the world is upheld by a serpent. Ananta, we've already heard that word. Ananta is the
Yes.
name of his serpent, and Vishnu. And yeah.
All right, let's continue. So the Nag awakens, he heaves a heavy breath, and the ladder is sent like an electric shock all along the wire encircling space. This electric field all of a sudden shoots out through all of space. Go to your pianoforte and execute upon the lower register of keys the 7 notes of the lower octave, down and up. Begin pianissimo, crescendo from the first key, and having struck fortissimo on the last lower note, go back diminuendo, getting out of the last note a hardly perceptible sound. Morendo pianissimo. And he says in parentheses, as I luckily for my illustration find it printed in one of the music pieces in KH's old trunk. The first and the last notes will represent to you the first and last spheres in the cycle of evolution. The highest, the one you strike just once, is our planet, meaning the physical planet. Remember, you have to reverse the order on the pianoforte. Begin with the 7th note, meaning the higher one, not with the first. Normally, when we practice scales, we go lower to higher and back. Start with the 7th note, not the first. The 7 vowels chanted by the Egyptian priests to the 7 rays of the rising sun, to which Memnon responded, meant just that, one life principle when an action runs in cycles, even as in physical science. It runs the round in the human body where the head represents and is, to the microcosmos, the physical world of matter, what the summit of the cycle is to the macrocosmos, the world of universal spiritual forces. And so, with the formation of worlds and the great descending and ascending circle of necessity, all is one law. Man has his 7 principles, the germs of which he brings with him at his birth. So has a planet or a world from first to last. Every sphere has its world of effects, the passing through which will afford a place of final rest to each of the human principles, except for the 7th principle. Remember, in the past session, he talked about as a person leaves this planet, this physical world, everything is left back to where it came from. The physical body returns to the earth because that's what supplied the atoms and the molecules for it to exist. The Jivatma returns to the universal equivalent, etc., etc. The only one that doesn't is the 7th principle, because that is spirit. The world A is born, and with it, clinging like barnacles to the bottom of a ship in motion, evolve from its first breath the living beings of its atmosphere, from the germs hitherto inert, now awakening to life with the first motion of the sphere. With sphere A begins the mineral kingdom and runs the round of mineral evolution. By the time it is completed, sphere B comes into objectivity and draws to itself the life which has completed its round on sphere 1 and has become a surplus, the fount of life being inexhaustible, for it is the true Arachne, doomed to spin out its web eternally, except for the periods of pralaya. Then comes vegetable life on sphere 1, and the same process takes place. On its downward course, life becomes, with every state, coarser, more material, and on its upward arc, more shadowy. No, there is not, nor can there be any responsibility until the time when matter and spirit are properly equalized.
There's the answer to his question.
Yes. He asked, do vegetables have any responsibility? And the answer is no. Up to man, life has no responsibility in any form, no more than has the fetus, who, in his mother's womb, passes through all the forms of life as a mineral, a vegetable, an animal, to become finally man.
Wow.
So,
Mic drop.
yeah, everything is cycles within cycles within cycles. And if you grasp one of those cycles, you can expand that to at least somewhat comprehend any of the other cycles.
And we have to leave you with that cliffhanger. We're going to expound upon that and flesh it out, but that's for the next session.
Yes, it is. So stay tuned. And we will return to take up where we left off next week.
Namaste.